Zombie apocalypse.
2,000 years passed before a revolutionary breakthrough was made by a mathematics professor in the ancient maritime republic of Venice. In 1609, Galileo Galilei demonstrated an instrument that would soon be called the telescope. From the tallest bell towers, he showed that this device could spot approaching ships hours before their sails were visible to the naked eye. Later, when he aimed his telescope at the night sky, Galileo discovered that the moon was a world with mountains. Jupiter had its own moons, and the Milky Way was a band of countless stars. Later, when he aimed his telescope at the night sky, Galileo discovered that the moon was a world with mountains. Jupiter had its own moons.
I believe it. It cannot be true. It was a hoax. I believe we landed on the moon. I don't think so. Nothing is sure. If it was a hoax, I would feel disappointed. They filmed it in Hollywood. There were quite a few revealing details in the footage. Like a can that looked like a Coke can. A can on the moon. There is proof that men went to the moon. Nobody has ever been there. Excuse me. Maybe we landed on the moon, but it didn't happen in 1969. I think the video they made was filmed in a studio. They couldn't have done it on the moon. My brother doesn't believe it. There were mistakes in the video, like the American flag that was streaming in the air, and on the moon there was no wind. The fluttering flag, the shadows were not where they should. I have no doubts. I think that men landed on the moon. You don't know what's real. I don't know a thing about space rockets, and don't read science fiction. The only thing I read is the Bible. Hi guys. Can we talk about the moon for a bit? Raise your hand if you're not sure that men landed on the moon. 1, 2, 3. There's 5 of us. They did it in the desert near Las Vegas. Tell me more about it. On the internet, there are people who say it was a hoax, but that's only what they say. I think we went to the moon, but there is so much uncertainty about that now, that someone should go there again to prove it. There's no point in it. They could say we're going back and do the same thing again. They can make you believe what they want to. On the internet, I've seen photos from the moon where you can't see the stars. But as there was little light there, they should have been visible. You believe in what you find on the internet? There's everything out there. I do believe it. When you can't see the stars from the Earth, it's because of the atmosphere. But there's no atmosphere on the moon, so the stars must have been visible from over there. Seems obvious. I'm sure one day we'll come back to the moon. You mean we've already been there? Or we'll just go there? But we will get there in the future. And what about then? On the day of the moon landing, I was 7 years old, and I lived in Bilbao. It was during summer holidays. That night I begged my mother to let me watch TV. I had seen movies about space travel before, and I was worried for the astronauts. In the films, space was full of monsters. I was pretty sure the astronauts would win in the end, but still I felt a bit anxious. The monsters could be huge, or could have lasers in their eyes. My mom sent me to bed, promising that if a monster appears, she'd wake me up. She didn't. On the internet, there's equal amount of websites confirming and denying that we went to the moon. Uncountable books and TV programs state that the photos and the videos supposedly made there were produced by a Hollywood film crew. Could it be the biggest lie of all time? Those who say we never went to the moon are keen to prove it's just a clever montage. Let's check them out. 1. The quality of the photos from the moon is surprisingly good. 2. In some photos, the shadows aren't parallel, and they should, as there was only one source of light, the sun. 3. In the same photos, you can see the flag fluttering, but on the moon, there's no wind. 4. You can't see the stars in any of the photos. 5. The computers at the time were too primitive to let us go to the moon. 6. In the pictures, the astronauts are always perfectly illuminated, even while in the shadow. 7. This footage shows Collins shaving in space, but when he arrived back on Earth, he had a mustache. The astronauts died in strange circumstances. 9. The famous footprint in the moon dust is strangely clear, even though there is no humidity on the moon. And 10. Why did we never go back? When men landed on the moon, I was asleep. I was 16. The next morning on the streets of Bilbao, I saw people stopping by the shops selling TVs. That's where I first saw men walking on the moon. Agustín Sánchez La Vega is a professor of applied physics at the Technical University of Bilbao. He worked for NASA and the European Space Agency. It was a spectacular achievement for men to walk on the surface of the moon. Seeing that sparked my fascination with the universe. I decided I wanted to know more about it, and spent all my savings on a small telescope. That's how my scientific journey began.
Have you ever dreamed of going up to outer space? Or maybe meeting other beings from another place? Have you ever wondered what it's like on other planets? Then you watch a science show and come to believe you understand it?
Today many people think that the moon landing had never happened. How would you convince them that it did? Some people might believe such nonsense because they lack the scientific knowledge. Anyone who knows the mechanisms of science must be sure that men did land on the moon. There are innumerable proofs.
NASA's missions to the moon were never completed. They just filmed them in a room and people believe it. I used to wonder what it's like to be an astronaut. Now when I see them acting, I can't help but to laugh a lot.
The astronauts gathered 382 kilograms of moon rocks, which were analyzed in thousands of laboratories. The tests show that they differed from the meteorites or anything that can be found on Earth. Besides, one of the pioneers of space travel, Valentin Tsiolkovsky, said that a man learns to walk in the playpen just to abandon it and go further. Well, we made our first steps on Earth and went ahead. One day we'll get to Mars and other planets. And went ahead. One day we'll get to Mars and other planets, but we need appropriate technology to do that. For the moment, there are other priorities than going back to the moon. Space is extremely important to humans now. We'd only see how crucial it is if we had to do it with no access to it. It seems like a lie, but there they are. They behave like they're taking a walk in the park. Those Americans are the greatest guys in the world. They're charlatans. They've got the propaganda and the money, but they're pea-brained. With a fraction of the money they've got, we'd have a bull ring in here. We have neither the will nor the money. That's it. Nothing has been decided yet. I could easily do what they had done. It would take 8,000 pesetas, or less. You would need some plywood, a fishbowl, some turpentine oil, and that's it. I know what you've been thinking. Asking pupils was a cheap trick. I admit that. But now I'm going to talk to our future intellectual elite. Department of Science and Technology of the University of the Basque Country. College. The temple of knowledge and nursery of future writers, artists, doctors, and other luminaries. Let's see what they think about the moon landing. Which of you are 100% sure that men landed on the moon? Let's see. Those who are sure, please raise your hand. There's no one? How can we know that? If we want to be scientifically correct, we cannot take our opinions out of thin air. I can't say, I believe it, if I don't have grounds for that. I don't trust the Yankees. During the space race, they could do anything to prove that they were first to do something. There's a lot of holes in their stories. They could have done it in a studio, with all the technical developments and special effects. It was really easy. Unless we go there again to get cleaner, more credible images, I won't be able to give it credence. It can all just be a montage prepared by NASA. The rocks could have been fabricated. If I don't see such a rock and don't touch it myself, I won't believe it. Gave us what we wanted to see. It was a clever trick to deceive us all. If we take a look at NASA's photos taken nowadays, the stars aren't visible either. But what we see in the pictures isn't what the astronauts out there do. Now imagine what you would see if you were up above. I'll talk to Pedro Duque, who went to the International Space Station in 2003. I'll ask him about the pictures from the moon and the visibility of the stars.
Hola, Pedro?
Hello, Pedro.
Pedro je bio matador pravi, strah i trepet svakoj muškoj kravi, a našao se neko od njega jači, samo ostade pesma da pevaju marijači.
How are you? Fine, good to hear you. I'll enable the video. I click on accept button. Wait a moment. I can see you now. Now that's better. Have you seen the stars when you were in space? In the pictures taken in space, they are invisible. I know why, but have you seen the stars? That's a silly question, which could be asked only by people who don't understand how photography works. When you capture a very bright object, the aperture is small, and you can't see less bright things, such as the stars. There are pictures in which you can see the stars, but to take them you have to leave the diaphragm open for a few minutes. It's a question of technical nuances. Probably in the future we'll develop technology that will allow us to take pictures showing both, the brightest and the darkest objects at the same time. But for the moment, it's impossible.
Pueden sacar lo muy brillante y también lo muy oscuro, pero de momento eso no existe porque no se usa, no es útil.
In 2002, a guy convinced that the moon landing was a hoax approached Buzz Aldrin, who took part in the Apollo 11 mission. He wanted to make him swear on the Bible that he really went to the moon. Aldrin clearly reacted like a person who had been there.
You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
On the night of the moon landing, I was staying in Asaba in the Pyrenees. I remember my brother's excitement. He woke up to watch TV. I didn't. That's why he became a businessman, and I'm a scientist. He had better foresight. Pedro Echenique is the head of the Department of Physics of Condensed Matter at the University of the Basque Country and a president of Donostia International Physics Center. What is the evidence that we really went to the moon? All the theories doubting the landing have been scientifically disproven by a number of researchers. Anytime something exceptional happens in science, the verification must also be exceptional. Throughout the ages, innumerable people worked and even suffered to defend rationality. For us scientists, it is a duty to make a case for scientific knowledge. Our whole world owes it to the great savants who suffered and sometimes died for truth. Humanity isn't ready for such an advancement, Professor. The most disturbing thing about the moon photographs are the shadows. In some of the pictures, they aren't parallel, and they should, as the sun was supposed to be the single source of light. Some say that that's because those are pictures of a set, lighted with spotlights. Or is there any other explanation? Common sense suggests that if there is one source of light, all the shadows should be parallel. Yet it doesn't depend solely on the source of light, but also on the lay of the land and the point of view of the spectator. An easy experiment to corroborate that can be carried out even at home. It's easy as long as you've got someone to get you all the sand to recreate the surface of the moon. We'll use the Tintin toys, and we will for a reason. We've got the surface ready. Now we'll simulate the moon landing. This spotlight is the sun. And here we've got the camera that would be sending the signal to Houston. I'm going to Houston and you can turn off the lights.
Yo me voy a Houston. Tú apaga las luces del plato.
What do I do? Ground control here. Liftoff. Wait a second. I guess it will land nicely here. Let's continue the conquest. We'll begin here. They get out of the rocket. The shadows are parallel. Let's send Tintin for a walk. Here? Well done. The shadows are divergent, even though there's one source of light. So it's nothing strange that shadows of two objects exposed to the same source of light are not parallel. Pedro, in 2003, when you were finishing preparations for your mission on the International Space Station, we talked and I told you there's a lot of people who think men never went to the moon. You didn't believe me then. Have you changed your viewpoint since? It seemed improbable to me, but I had second thoughts about it, and I concluded that it's all due to the very low quality of information presented to the people. Most journalists work in a terrible hurry. They don't even think about verifying information. Additionally, we are deluged with enormous quantities of information which was purposely faked or manipulated to somebody's benefit. There are programs where they pay people to complain about something on TV. That's a disgrace. No wonder people have doubts. Somebody possessing the basic knowledge is not going to believe it, but huge numbers of people might give it credence. And what about the moon rocks? Aren't they convincing enough to make anyone believe we went to the moon? Apparently not, as some people say they're fake. Let's ask an expert in rocks and minerals. They have distinct characteristics, letting us determine that they are moon rocks, obtainable only if one traveled to the moon. Iñaki Gil Ibarbuchi is a professor of mineralogy at the University of the Basque Country. I guess a thing that might convince a skeptic is that the rocks in question, the moon rocks, are much older than even the oldest rocks found on Earth. There's about a 500 million year difference. That's because on Earth, the oldest rocks didn't survive to the present day due to erosion processes caused by water, the atmosphere, the wind, and tectonic movements. That's why they didn't survive. On the other hand, on the moon, the first rocks that were formed survived until today, as there's no atmosphere or tectonic movements over there. The oldest rocks on Earth are around 4 billion years old, and the moon rocks can be almost 4.5 billion years old. Attention, Houston! We have detected a starship of unknown origin. The moon! I'm on the moon!